Welcome, wanderers, to Whittle Walsh's workshop. We're here on Whittle Walsh's workshop. We'll whittle you what you want. Well, wanderers, I'm sure many of you are wondering, Whittle Walsh, where have you been? Well, spring came, and then school got out, and then summer came, and there was vacations and travel and this and that and so on and so forth. And so the bus got put on the back burner as usual. But we're back in the bus. So it's kind of exciting here. We're at the next stage of the game, which is we're going to start sheeting the inside of the bus, which is a big milestone, I think, in this whole build process. We finally got all the insulation in the walls. It's wired, it's rough wired in. The solar panels and racking system are mounted on the roof. There's a roof raise. There's some RV windows. There's a subfloor. Lots and lots have had to happen before we could get to this point. But now we're finally closing in the bus, and it feels good. So let me explain to you what we've decided to do with the ceiling. So let me just see if I can spin this around and show you. So here's what we got going on so far. That right there is masonite or hardboard, some people call it. It's not quite a 1/4 inch thick. It's like 3/16 of an inch thick. So it's very flexible. I mean, this is the stuff right here. It's very flexible. I'm sure you've seen it. It's been around forever. They make pegboard out of it and things like that. So, but I am screwing the crap out of it just to kind of maintain this arch. It's very hard to get this arc in a piece of plywood. So I'm using this stuff. And I was gonna just use one sheet because there's some stuff that I'm gonna do to the ceiling that's really, this is just kind of the underlayment. So there's one more spectacular thing that's coming on this ceiling, and wait till you see it. It's really gonna make this thing the Partridge Family special. So you'll have to stay tuned for that. But let me explain to you what I'm gonna do here. I was just gonna do one layer, but I think I'm gonna do two because some of the seams aren't quite that good. And I also want to try to recess some of these screws better for this next phase that I'm going to do. But in order to get this thing on here, I have to figure out where my cuts are for these lights, because I want them all to kind of line up, and I don't really want to bore through this ceiling with a hole saw for fear of cutting into those wires that I work so hard on. So what I do is I've got a strip of this hardboard cut. It's about a 2-inch rip, right? And so what I'll do is I'll put it on here, and I have been actually screwing it to some of my hat channels. And when I do that, I get the center line of these lights. So I'll mark this out too, this opening, and I kind of come across here like so, and screw it up. And when it's all sucked up and over, it actually hits those center lines on this thing, right? So like that. So then I will take this piece off, and I will take it out to the saw table. I'll take a piece of my masonite, I'll set it down on there. I'll set this on top, and I'll scribe out everywhere there's a light. And then I'll come in here and I'll measure off my joint to my center of the first one, to my center of the second one, to my center of the third one, and so on. This is actually the switch that's going to go into the wall right here. And I'll bore all those out with a 2 1/4 inch hole saw, which is what it calls for these puck lights that I'm going to put in. And then I'll bring it back in here, and I set one side of this masonite down on this ledger board that I've got screwed up. I've got to raise that one up a little bit. I set that on there, and I push all this up in there, and I screw it off. Tick, 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 tick. And that's the process. And then when I come back, I'm gonna put another layer on. I'll come back and I'll start with like a 2-footer or whatever this is here in the middle of these lights. So I stagger these joints, and hopefully the second layer will be a little bit less wavy on some of these spots here. And I'll really try to recess all those screws a little better. So there it is. Welcome back, Wanderers.
Okay, Wanderers, I'm out here at the cut table. I got my piece of masonite out here. I've got my hole saw ready to go. I've got my little jig, so I just line that up. That's the right side with the right side. And these right here are actually my my framing stringers right there. So I'll mark those two, that way I can lay out my screw pattern. But as you see, coming down here, that's the center of my light. Those are some old numbers. That's for another sheet. But I got my new numbers, so I've got that center line down there. Comes all the way up from that one. And then I come down here a ways, and I've got the center line of that light. So I scribe that out too. I've got the I marked the edges of that fan in there, so I've got that marked out as well. And that was, 2.5 and 15.5. The centers of my lights were 3, 21, and 39. So once I get those, I come through here and I take my hole saw like so, and I stick it. Oh, I'm trying to get it on here. Stick it right on that hole. Sorry, you can't see that. And there we go. Just bore it out. Ta-da! There's one. And I'll do all those. I'll cut that thing out. And then what I've been doing too is like I said, I'll scribe these lines in here, right? So these are where my struts go, or whatever I'm trying to say, my stringers on my framing. I'll bring my little pattern up here, and I'll do the same thing right here, and I'll mark the centers of these. Right. Okay. And then on the back side of this, I've got a little jig. I've got a little. Those are spaced at 3. Those are spaced at 3 inches. So why I'm doing this is because once I cover it with the second sheet, I'm gonna want to know where those screws are underneath, so I don't just keep running screws on top of screws on top of screws. That is frustrating. So if you take a little time and you lay your screws out, on this section here I'm going every 6 inches. So I'll do every other one of these. So then I just kind of give myself a little reference. I do one like that, and one like that, skipping every other one, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And I do that through the whole sheet. That way when I put this up there, I know where my screws are gonna go. It looks a lot better. And then when I lay out my second sheet, I'll go to the other 3-inch line, and I'll know that I missed. So there's the process.